This is 3 liters of sunflower cooking oil. It was going for 709 shillings in August 2020, then 780 shillings in June 2021, then 850 shillings in November 2021. Today, it retails for more than 1,500 shillings. And it's not just cooking oil. The cost of living is rising for many household products.
The cost of living has really cost my household because we cannot afford 3 meals in a day. My household cannot eat what they want. They cannot go to school well. They cannot actually have what they need to help them to live well in the household. So there is a lot of problems in the house because I have children in school. I have they need clothing, they need water, they need electricity and all this. And all that I cannot afford because the cost of living is high.
From food prices, clothing and footwear, utilities like water and electricity, and even transport, it is a story many families are familiar with. Not just locally, but globally, with some countries more affected than others. This is called inflation, and it is being caused by many external factors which are all out of the control of households. But while you may not have a say on the pricing of goods and services, there are a few things you can do to make the going just a bit easier.
One is budgeting. I think you talked about it. The importance of that is that it now gives you flexibility or a room to have something for savings. So if you have a clear budget or a clear plan of how you spend all your income, then you put something aside for savings, then the next part is now saving. So you have a budget, then next is savings. So once you save, then you make sure that you're putting money in an interest earning account, and the higher the interest, the better. So really, that is really how households should look at it. It's a budget that now give you opportunity to have something for savings.
To understand how to deal with the rising cost of living, you have to understand what is causing inflation in the first place. But let's start with inflation. What is it? Inflation is simply the increase in prices of goods and services. This increase in prices reduces your purchasing power. This means that the goods and services you can buy for a certain amount reduces over time.
Yeah, inflation is simply a general increase in the price of goods and services. For example, if you are going to buy your maize flour, for example, is 100 shillings for 2 kg. That is should be the normal price. Then you are going to the shop, next day it has increased to 120 shillings, 150 shillings, 180 shillings, and even now 230 shillings. That's simply inflation because you are still getting the same quantity, but now you have to spend more to get it. So it's basically a general increase in the prices of goods and services.
Inflation is calculated by monitoring the prices of basket of goods and services consumed by households. In Kenya, the National Bureau of Statistics keeps track of 13 categories ranging from food and beverages to transport costs. KNBS then compares the prices of these items in the current month against their prices on same month of the previous year. For example, the prices for food and non-alcoholic beverages increased by 12.15% in April 2022 compared to April 2021. Financial services had the lowest inflation at 0.46%. The average was 6.47%. Inflation has always been there. If you go back to any point in time in any modern society, the prices of goods and services are always high compared to the past. While inflation has always been there, you are not alone if you're feeling like the cost of living has been accelerating at a rapid pace lately. Its effect has been sharply felt in the last 2 years across the world. The question is, how did we get here?
So what happened during the COVID time? People lost their jobs, right? And businesses were not growing, and that now brought about a shrink in the economy. So you find that people's purchasing power was also reduced. Yes, so that's what now the effect of COVID had to households, yes. Their income reduced, and then now they were not able to buy things that they used to buy with the amount of money they had before COVID.
You see, the world today is interconnected. We rely on each other for our day-to-day items. Our consumer electronics come from China, crude oil from Middle East, wheat and fertilizer from Russia, pharmaceutical items from US, while rice, maize and milk are imported from our EAC neighbors. Any disruption in production or the global supply chain will affect the prices.
In tourism, for example, in Kenya, tourists could not come to the country. There are so many flights that were on the ground, were grounded. Cruise ships were all in the ports, not moving anymore. So basically, it was a chain that affected the world over. And what happens that because of that limited movement of goods and services, the trade was not really possible. The trade was impacted in a way that has never been seen before, and that caused inflation or caused a restraint in resources across the world, and that is what we refer to as inflation, as high cost of living, and as the problem that all people have been facing up to now.
Unfortunately, just when the vaccine rollout was taking shape, the world economy was affected by another major event.
What is happening with the Ukraine-Russia war, it has an effect on the global supply chain. So when the global supply chain is affected, it trickles down to countries which have an open economy. So you find that the supply is less and people are demanding more. Then now it brings about now high cost of goods and services, yes.
These unpredictable events happening back to back have sent shockwaves across the world. Governments have been struggling to keep the prices of basic goods low, and households have felt the pain in their wallets.
What that really means in a simple term is that a ship that was supposed to be carrying maybe bales or several tonnage of, let's say, wheat and wheat grain that was supposed to be coming to Africa and maybe in Kenya, when there is such kind of war, those ships cannot leave the port. Some of the ports are destroyed, so it means that that grain cannot get to these countries as we had hoped. The same could be said of fuel and fuel products, particularly petroleum products, and it could also be said about the cooking oil, the cement, the steel, everything that has to come through the ship. But again, you also realize that when there's such kind of wars, you notice that international politics, for example, the European countries and even the America are putting some sanctions on some of these countries like Russia. Some of those sanctions means that Russia cannot supply its, for example, fuel or even gas. When that happens, then it means that there's shortage again internationally. When that shortage is there, locally it reflects in terms of high prices, because now everybody's competing for very, very little commodity.
But the most important question for many people is not how we got here. It is, where do we go from here? How do you survive this?
I think my main advice is understand where your money is going. You need to understand your expenses. What expenses do you incur each and every month? The other advice is budget your money, right? So budgeting your money, as I had mentioned earlier, it tells your money where to go. So you can be able to control your spending and also tracking your expenses. So if you track your expenses over a very period of time, you can be able to see that you spend a certain amount in maybe something that you can actually live without, right? So now that is actually my advice for households during this period of time.
The first stop is a budget. Many people do not have a monthly budget.
Yes, I do monthly budgets, but with the current situation, one is not able to stick to the budgeting since the rise in products are happening almost every day.
The budget is a key tool to help you stay on top of your finances.
We can say that budget is basically planning, and we all know the importance of planning in life. What happens is that if you have your income, you need to have an idea of your spendings in every month. You need to have an idea of what you spend on maybe rent. If you are living in a rented house, you have an idea of what you spend on clothing, what you spend on food, what you spend on school fee, for example, or other spendings you have. So once you have them and you plan them very, very well, then you might be able to tell yourself what balance can I have for discretionary items or those items that are not a must, and what else can I have for the saving. Without budgeting, you might end up overspending all your income before even you have nothing for saving, and you might end up even not having money for important things like food for the rest of the month. So that you might end up now having to borrow and living in a situation where you are living in debt after debt after debt. So budgeting really helps you to avoid such situation.
You need to take stock of where you were before COVID and where you are now. For most people, their income has gone down or remained stagnant, while the expenses have gone up. For others, their income was lost or reduced, unfortunately.
When COVID hit the world generally, most factories closed. There was that lockdown everywhere. When that happens, that people lose income, people lose jobs, and there's just chaos everywhere.
There are other interventions that can be done by authorities to tame the cost of living. While all this is possible, it is wiser to take measures on your own where you can and adjust your lifestyle if possible.
You need to budget your money, you need to restructure your budget, you need to see what works, what is a need for you right now, and what is a want for you right now. Because inflation is not a switch where we switch off and on. It is a progressive thing that it will take time for us to recover from inflation.
You should also take the necessary steps to protect yourself from future uncertainties and inflation, which is guaranteed to be there.
The truth is that there are so many other factors that can trigger the situation and increase the cost of living just as now. So what happens that as an individual member of the household, or rather as from your income, you need to always put something aside, just as an emergency saving or a saving, as I might put it, so that in case of anything arises that again disrupts, rather make the cost of living go higher than expected, you always have somewhere to run to. You don't have to face a situation where you have to borrow and live in a disparate way. So I believe savings, rather putting something aside for a savings account, is very, very important. It's really the only arsenal you have against enemy like inflation.
The first thing to do is save. And you have to keep your money in an account that earns you interest at a higher rate than the inflation rate if possible. That way, your money doesn't lose value over time.
So inflation affects savings in the sense that it erodes the value of money. So generally, even without talking about savings, when you talk about money, inflation erodes the value of money.
Ideally, what we can say is that all the money should be put in an interest earning account. So all savings should be interest earning savings. For example, if I take my money, let's say 10,000, and I put it under the mattress, and I say that is emergency savings, truth be told, after 2 years, what 10,000 can purchase today is not the same thing it can purchase in the next 2 years. So what we advise people is that instead of putting that money under your mattress or in a bank account that does not earn interest, you are better off putting that money in an account where it earns interest. And the higher the interest, the better. Why? Because interest is usually related to inflation. I think we talked about inflation earlier on. So your only arsenal against inflation is the interest. If inflation rate is on average is 5%, then you want a savings product that gives you above the inflation. Let's say 8%, 9%, so that your net return will be that 9% minus 5%, so it's 4%. In other words, if you put your money in a savings product, after 2 years, the money grows by some amount, and that growth is really what protects you against inflation now. You have a savings products like unit trust. An example is Azemele Asset Management, where you have a savings plan which give you up to 9% net, that's after tax and everything else. So it's already far much above the inflation.
The second thing is to have a detailed monthly budget and keeping track of your expenses. Doing this will help you notice when inflation starts impacting your lifestyle. It will also help you easily identify areas where you can make adjustments to mitigate the high cost of living.
So at the beginning of every month, you sit down and now you tell your money, this is where I want my money to go, like in fixed and variable expenses. So fixed expenses are things like you incur each and every month, right? So you can say, like, since you already know them, you can say, I pay X for rent, I pay Y for electricity. These are the costs that incur each and every month. Then you have variable expenses. So variable expenses are those expenses which you don't incur each and every month. These are things like traveling, these are things like going out and all those things. So a budget ideally tells you guides your money where to go, instead of you wondering where your money has gone. But a budget works hand in hand with tracking your expenses. So you have to track your expenses to see that at the end of the month, have I been within my budget?
Taking these simple steps will help you prepare for the future. And while the future is always uncertain, you can be sure that inflation is certain. It will surely happen again, and you need to prepare to the best of your ability.